Here we go. Okay, so let me show you Thomas Hobbes. This is just ye old. Let me go to the Wikipedia there. Considered the adult in the room on the internet. So keep in mind 1588 to 1679, that's what, 91 years. Now let's take a look at Descartes. Same thing. Notice, so he's born in 1596, so that's 8 years after Hobbes. And he dies in 1650, so that's way earlier than 79, right? So he's younger than Hobbes, but he dies sooner. And everybody blames Queen Christina for that. So it's her main claim to fame, besides being Queen of Sweden and getting bored and abdicating the throne to her brother Gustav so that she could go gallivanting around Europe, etc. But that's just Queen Christina. But so keep in mind that Hobbes and Descartes are contemporaries, at least for as long as Descartes lives. And that's why in the Meditations, in our text, one of the responses to the Meditations that was gathered by Father Mersenne in Paris was Thomas Hobbes's response. And Thomas Hobbes will be doing next class, and Hobbes and Descartes go back and forth between one another on quite a few things. Hobbes being British and leading into the British empiricist tradition, whereas René Descartes, is going to essentially give us the European or continental European rationalist position, which essentially will continue the divide that occurs in Europe, in the church, between the Platonists on the one hand, who were followers of Augustine, and the Aristotelians on the other hand, who, remember the philosopher, and Aquinas was the one that merged the two of them together. And even though Aquinas did such a great job on that, it is very complex. It left a lot of people very, very puzzled, and as a result, it didn't stop the internecine warfare between the theologians on both camps. And so at the time of Descartes, his teachers, and he had both Augustines and Jesuits who were his teachers, were very split themselves over whether knowledge was based on Aristotelian empiricist ideas, or if it was really more like Plato described it, where basically knowledge was abstract, ideas, colorless, ideas have no colors, etc. And yet mathematics, for example, 2 + 2 = 4 is absolutely certain, whereas that I'm an existing body might be an illusion. By the way, you're probably all familiar with the movie The Matrix. Yes, that's great, because you can imagine, thanks to the movie, that you can actually think that perhaps everything that you're experiencing is an illusion brought about thanks to some all-powerful, basically, computer or something that's got you in a little vat, and everything that you're thinking you're experiencing is really just, mental stimulation, thanks to this computer, the Matrix, that's running your life, right? So if you that's an absolutely perfect example of the kind of problem that Descartes brings up. How do I know? How do I know? In the meditation, notice, as he goes through the various, there's a statue of Descartes, by the way, in Paris, on the Rue de Commerce, which is the business street. And actually, I think it's hilarious that it's really the parking lot. A lot of the other statues in Paris are surrounded by a great big park. You know, they made sure that the statue was set off in the grass and everything. And by the way, as far as I know, Descartes is like the French people's favorite philosopher from France. They really think of him as their best, most historically relevant philosopher. Of course, they have lots of philosophers. In fact, most Frenchmen are philosophers. So if you go to visit and you sit at the cafe, you can talk about all sorts of philosophy with Joe Snuffy. You know, they're into philosophy, and it would actually be Joseph Snoffé, right? Because, you know, they pronounce things funny there. But so that was kind of cool. Yes, you can. This is Google Earth. It's funny when you look at what pictures are selected for Descartes. There's quite a lot of ages. And in fact, let me go back to A.C. Grayling for a moment, because he has, I think, the best book I've read recently on Descartes. And so that's this one. The Life and Times of a Genius. A.C. Grayling argues that he was a spy for the Jesuits. So while he was traveling around Europe in the military and on his own, he would travel to all the main areas where the, what was it, the 20-year war, the 30-year war, whatever they were currently fighting about at the time. The French worried about what the Germans might do, and Descartes, of course, being French, was traveling in Germany, visiting lots of different people, writing letters and so on, but obviously coming back to France to report on what he had seen. And by the way, as A.C. Grayling pointed out in that little lecture, just as he got close to dying, the French had a bit of a revolution. It wasn't one of the big ones, but even so, that meant that Descartes lost favor, and so he was not privileged at the end, and everyone is, I think, familiar that he fled to the Netherlands. So his political side in France became out of favor, and he had to flee to the Netherlands where he would be safer. And this is really cool. Let me show you this. This is the anatomy lesson with Dr. Tulip. So that's a video. Let me go to just the image. So can you see that? Or is that too small? Maybe I can make it bigger.
Right with the image, maybe?
Maybe one of these will be, there's a little bit bigger. It's not that important. This is a Rembrandt. It's called The Anatomy Lesson, and that's actually Dr. Tulip. It's a portrait of Dr. Tulip explaining to a group of interested paying attendees how the muscles work on that corpse that he's looking at. It's a fresh corpse, by the way. It had just arrived that day because the guy was a criminal that was hung that morning, and Dr. Tulip paid to have his body brought to his lab. It was actually a dinner theater kind of set up, and while people were there for his exposition on the various muscles, they also had lunch or dinner. And what's interesting about that particular first session was René Descartes was present at that session. He was not in the painting, by the way, but he was there in the audience, having lunch, I suppose. Also, we know that the criminal that's in the painting did not have a right hand. It had already been cut off for a previous offense. Poor guy. So Rembrandt had to fake it. That's a fake arm painted there, etc. He did not actually paint that on site. He had everyone at his studio come individually and painted them all separately, and then put them all, of course. So it's photoshopped, basically. But that's pretty interesting. And yes, tulip is where we get the flower from. I'm sure he didn't invent the flower, but he named it at least, and loved them, and of course that eventually led to a passion for those flowers in the Netherlands, so that's kind of cool. Descartes moved a lot while he was living in the Netherlands. It might have been the case that he moved a lot anyway, but at least while he was in the Netherlands, I believe he moved at least every 3 months. And I understand exactly why. Because he's not just interested in Dr. Tulip doing an anatomy lesson, an autopsy on the dead body. He's probably doing them himself. So he could probably buy dead bodies from grave diggers who would dig up the bodies and bring them to his house. He was also studying cows and things of that sort in his dining room. And by the way, this is before they have the kind of cleaning going on that we associate with health, etc. So I can imagine the house becoming quite rancid. Sorry about that, but so it makes sense to me that he was moving a lot. Although they also say that the reason he moved a lot was because he valued his privacy and he didn't want enemies to catch him, find out where he was, who were those enemies. But we know that he was doing all of that because, as you saw in your text, pineal gland, if you look up pineal gland, so this is his drawing, and in the center here of the brain you can see his rendition of what he discovered and called the pineal gland, which is the center of the brain. It sits right on top of the spine. It is very important, of course, but Descartes believed it was the seat of the soul. This was where the soul, the mind, interacts with the body. As A.C. Grayling pointed out, that for Descartes, he's a mind-body dualist. We need to unpack that a little bit. Did it happen primarily because of his argument that in the meditations, as we experience our senses, we can't really trust them? Because under different lighting conditions, under different temperature conditions, the wax changes, the colors change, the shapes change. So as I look at things from different angles, etc., right? So it seems like our senses are constantly giving us different impressions. So how can we assume that the things that they're giving us information about are the way they appear to us? In fact, he's pretty convinced that they aren't, right? If that's the case, but at the same time, I'm absolutely convinced that I have a mind. I'm sure of that. And how does he get to be that? Well, this is the famous cogito ergo sum, right? Which says that when I get right down to it, and I've doubted everything that I could possibly know, to find what can I not doubt, it seems that the one thing I cannot doubt is that I am thinking. Cogito, right? I think. And so famously, cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am, right? Now, prior to this, he's already established the idea of a demon that has power over me. This is essentially the same thing as the Matrix, right? That's in charge of my mind, right? So even if there is a Matrix, even if there is this demon that's making me think whatever the demon wants me to think, the one thing that the demon cannot fool me into thinking is that I exist. Because if I didn't exist, I wouldn't be able to have the demon fool me. So I have to exist. And at that point, what I love doing is reading a piece from Augustine, St. Augustine. The reason this is fun is because Augustine is writing in roughly 440, earlier than that, maybe 420, 410, somewhere around then. And considering Descartes is in the 90s, 1610, 1620, or later, it's pretty obvious that Augustine is first, and since Augustine would certainly have been covered in his school, then it's pretty clear that Descartes would have been familiar with this whole piece. And this is from The City of God, book 11, chapter 26. And if you have your text with you, it's on page 290. I'm reading it without my glasses. That's pretty dumb. I should get my glasses. It is on the internet too, of course, but let me just read it.
What page did you say it was on?
Page 290. This is Augustine, St. Augustine. We ourselves can recognize in ourselves an image of God, in the sense of an image of the Trinity. Of course, it is merely an image, and in fact a very remote one. There is no question of identity, nor of co-eternity, nor, in one word, of consubstantiality with him. Nevertheless, it is an image which by nature is nearer to God than anything else in all creation, and one that by transforming grace can be perfected into a still closer resemblance. For we are, and we know that we are, and we love to be and to know that we are. And in this trinity of being, knowledge, and love, there is not a shadow of illusion to disturb us. For we do not reach these inner realities with our bodily senses as we do external objects, as for example color by seeing, sound by hearing, odor by smelling, flavor by tasting, hard or soft objects by touching. In the case of such sensible things, the best we can do is to form very close and immaterial images which help us to turn them over in our minds, to hold them in our memory, and thus to keep our love for them alive, but without any illusion of image, fancy, or phantasm. I am certain that I am, that I know that I am, and that I love to be and to know. In the face of these truths, the quibbles of the skeptics lose their force. If they say, "What if you are mistaken?" Well, if I am mistaken, I am. For if one does not exist, he can by no means be mistaken. therefore I am, if I am mistaken. Because therefore I am, if I am mistaken, how can I be mistaken that I am, since it is certain that I am, if I am mistaken? And because if I could be mistaken, I would have to be the one who is mistaken. Therefore, I am most certainly not mistaken in knowing that I am, nor, as a consequence, am I mistaken in knowing that I know. For just as I know that I am, I also know that I know. And when I love both to be and to know, then I add to the things I know a third and equally important knowledge, the fact that I love. Nor am I mistaken that I love, etc. It's very nice. But that's the whole thing. And if you think about it, that's the summation of his 6-day meditation article, which he wrote in bed. Each day, or Descartes, not Augustine. So you give 1,000 years, and all that happens is Descartes gets famous for writing the same thing, except that he adds 6 days worth of reading to it instead of just one. So that's kind of fun. But I'm sure Descartes knew that the people that he was writing to also knew the same piece. So he's just reiterating to them, I'm sure, something that they would already be familiar with, right? But there's also a political issue to Descartes' meditations, and that's where knowledge or our certitude comes from. Who is the authority? And with the church being the authority at this point, notice that Galileo famously ends up having to recant, even though famously he says it still moves as he was being chased out of the room, perhaps. The church is the authority. You have to listen to what the church says. Well, Descartes is basically arguing that if I'm going to establish certitude, figure out where true knowledge can be based, and I can't trust my senses, all I can know for sure is that I exist. So cogito ergo sum. That's not sufficient. I have to go on from there in order to know anything else, right? So that's solipsism. That doesn't help me know other things. It doesn't convince me that things are out there, that you were out there. You might be just a figment of my imagination. By the way, I actually met Figment in Disney World once. So if you remember Figment, that purple dragon from Disney, okay, forget it. It was at the Kodiak Pavilion in Epcot Center, but I think it's gone. It was there for a while. In any case, how do I ground everything else for Descartes? And his answer is that we have to resort back to God. And so Descartes, in the rest of the meditation, will give us a proof. In fact, there's two different proofs for God, right? And this is referred to as his version of the ontological argument. Now, the ontological argument, I don't remember if I brought this up at all, but that's based on the definition of God. And we have that in St. Anselm, ontological argument, which is in 2 places, but the easiest place is in his Proslogion. And by the way, it's still the definition that theologians use. So I believe it's the first place where this definition occurs. But once it's started and everybody picks it up, they realize this is really cool stuff. It's the best definition for God. And basically, as God is that than which nothing greater can be thought. There's some important aspects to it. Notice that it's not an affirming definition. It doesn't say God is tall. It instead uses what's referred to as the via negativa, the negative approach. It says God is that than which nothing greater can be thought. Right? And the interesting point in that is that you can't say, well, I can imagine the emperor. And the emperor is way more powerful than anything else. Well, but by definition, God is that in which nothing greater can be thought. So God must be greater than the emperor. Okay, easy. And by the way, the emperor exists, at least say Augustus existed, or you pick the Napoleon, whichever emperor you want. Right now, I guess it's Trump. Oh, sorry, that's terrible. Shouldn't say that. Sorry, I tell jokes. They're not funny, but hey, we try, right? My wife says I'm trying, that's kind of fun. But so, if we believe that something, maybe more favorite would be the universe. The universe exists. Nobody doubts that. Right? But by definition, God is that in which nothing greater can be thought. So therefore, God, by definition, must be greater than the universe. Otherwise, it's a contradiction. And you know how contradiction kind of goes along with logical truth, right? So that's Anselm's argument, the ontological argument. For the actual definition, God is the only necessary being. Everything else is contingent. It can be, we can imagine it existing, peanut butter. I know there's peanut butter on Earth. I probably have some in my kitchen, I'm pretty sure, unless somebody ate it all. That was a lot of peanut butter. It was one of those big jars. So I know there's peanut butter on the Earth, but I can imagine a day when peanut butter didn't exist. Dinosaurs could not have made peanut butter sandwiches, especially with those little arms that they had. They didn't have the right kind of teeth, etc. So I don't believe peanut butter existed during the dinosaurs. And I can imagine eventually dinosaurs will be back and will be gone, and so peanut butter will be gone again. Now that's because of Jurassic Park. They're going to bring dinosaurs back. And of course, if you've watched those movies, you know they eventually get to the mainland and eat us all for lunch. And they don't like peanut butter, so peanut butter is contingent, right? It's not going to be around forever. And actually, that's true of everything. Maybe not the universe. Although, actually, yes, because the universe, we think, started at some point, right? Big Bang. In fact, what the physicists are looking for that started the Big Bang is essentially the same thing that the theologians are calling God. So it's just another name for it, right? Okay, so that's Anselm. And he gives us, I think, an argument that annoys the heck out of people, especially when I say it works, because that annoys them even further, especially if they're absolutely convinced that you can disprove that God exists by simply talking about the flying spaghetti monster, right? As if that's about as silly as your concept. Actually not. But Descartes does not use this version of the ontological argument. He instead comes up with something that, frankly, is much weaker, and I don't think succeeds. But what he says is, I have a conception of a all-perfect being. Now the thing is, I'm not perfect, because I was in doubt just a few minutes ago. And that is not indicative of perfection. So therefore, I'm not perfect, but I have a conception of a perfect being. Then he says, every effect requires a cause that's greater than the effect. The cause must be greater than the effect. Where does he get that? He gets that from Galileo, of course, right? But so the cause must be greater than the effect. Well, if that's the case, and the effect in his mind is the conception of an all-perfect being, he says that that means there can only be a perfect being that put that conception in my mind. And so therefore God must exist. It's essentially the argument. I feel like it's so wishy-washy, but nonetheless, there it is. And that's pretty much the way that the second version comes also. So there's no help for it. He's requiring cause and effect relationships, which, by the way, David Hume is going to totally destroy in just a few generations, as we'll see. But so he gives us his own argument for the existence of God. Let me put that up here. Descartes' ontological argument. Go to Stanford. Who knows? Maybe thanks to Stanford, I could understand that that's one of the poorly understood aspects of his philosophy by me. So maybe it's better to some others. But in any case. So now he has the concept of God. God exists. So I exist as thinking thing. So res cogitans, I'm a thinking thing, abstract. It doesn't give me my body back, by the way. Right? But I also now have the concept of God. And God is all perfect, which means God would not lie to me. And that being the case, everything that's clear and distinct to me must be true. Now, this is where things get political, because he's not arguing that what the church tells me is clear and distinct. In fact, he never goes back to things that he can discover with his senses. This is where he's a rationalist. The only things that are clear and distinct are mathematics. 1 + 1 = 2, right? So if I want to look for real knowledge, I have to go to mathematics and not theology, not the church, not Aquinas' Summa Theologica or Summa Contra Gentiles, which, by the way, I don't think Descartes ever read those. He was actually pretty fairly unread as far as the rest of philosophy is concerned. He was very much into math. He gives us algebraic geometry, one of his inventions. He really was a mathematician, much more of a mathematician than a philosopher in his day, and known for that. We oddly think of him as famous because of this cogito ergo sum, which was really small potatoes in his day, as far as his contemporaries were. But I mean, mostly when we study Descartes today, we don't look at his math and all those other things. This is the article that always ends up in every introduction to philosophy text, is the Meditations, and it's not really the more important stuff of Descartes. So let's see here. Okay. So now some questions that I have. So I mentioned A.C. Grayling suggesting that he was a spy for the Jesuits. That's pretty interesting. Part of what he was also looking for, by the way, was the, what's the name of that group that was a real group. We usually make fun of them and use them in fictional movies today. The Illuminati, right? You're familiar with that? there really was a group, there's historical data about them, so there really was a group that tried to basically become like a fraternity for geniuses and things of that sort. Didn't really hold up, but it had a reputation, and so people were curious about it, and Descartes was tasked, apparently, if he was a spy, he was tasked, among other things, to find out who were the members of the Illuminati and were they planning revolution or whatever. The group was in Paris at the time, and so when he came back to Paris, he was trying to get into the group in order to find out more about them as a spy. It's not clear that he ever actually got into the group, but that's something else he was doing. So the influence that Galileo had on him convinced him that we are mechanical. So as Dr. Tulip was also showing in that painting, he's looking at how the muscles work. And if you think about it, this is all new stuff. They're just beginning to learn this kind of stuff about bodies and how they work. They had not discovered yet the way blood flows, right? The circulation of the blood, that hadn't been discovered yet. Thomas Hobbes, remember, a contemporary of his, thought that the tubes in our body were full of air, and that when we touch things, what's happening is the pressure on our tubular vessels in our body put pressure on the air, and that put pressure on our brains, so that the reason we knew we were touching things was because of this pressure on the air in our tubes and stuff, right? All of that's totally wrong, of course, right? But they're just beginning. Hobbes argued that the reason we can see is because particles from the things we see are actually flying into our eyes. And when I first read that in the Leviathan, which is in the text, so you could read that, I thought, how ridiculous. What a stupid thing, little particles. And then it being photons. That is actually what's happening. They're just way smaller, etc. And it's the light reflecting off of it. It's not like parts of the chair flying themselves into my eyes as I'm looking at it. But the light, of course, is doing precisely that. So it's very rudimentary. It's almost hilarious the way some of their guesses are. Remember, they thought that heat seeped as like a substance from one warm thing to cold things. They called it phlogiston. Have you ever heard of that? No? This is like super cool. Phlogiston. Well, I totally misspoke. There it is. Phlogiston. Just absolute hilarious, actually. You get this phlogiston, I guess. I don't think the Greeks pronounced their G's J, burning up, etc. So that's pretty cool. So there's all kinds of things. There's a fascinating doctor who was from Switzerland. And they thought of him as Europe's physician. I need more right words for the book. So let me see. Let's get rid of her. We don't need him. There it is. Actually, his name, depending on where he was, could be spelled different ways. from Switzerland. Then, after studying medicine, moved to France. He was so well thought of by some members of the king's court that he became, I think, King Louis's, I forget which one's, physician, court physician in Paris. And when King Louis died, hopefully through no fault of Dr. Mayer, he fled because the opposing political, I call it political, but there's two sets of doctors, right? Ones that are materialists. They believe that physical substances actually have something to do with the health of the body, like food and rest and drink and warmth and etc. You need these things. That was a physicalist or a materialist, and Dr. Mayer was a materialist. He believed physical things were important. The others believed that all of the health care issues were spiritual. So, for example, if you were stabbed by a sword and the wound became infected, the proper way to cure it was to have the right ritual said over the sword that did it. That's how you cured yourself, right? Or you get the idea. So this is an amazing shift that a lot of folks didn't believe, and got people in various kinds of trouble with those that disagreed. When he fled France, so I guess is it Henry IV, not Louis something or other? Sorry. You lose track of which kings are rich and what do they do. But Mayer fled and went to England, where he became the court physician for the king there, and ended up rich, had his own little castle with a tower, and in the tower he also did astronomical experiments, etc. So that's pretty cool. The 2003 here was the author of the book that I'm looking at here, Trevor Roper. Great book, by the way. And Trevor Roper was considered a real dean of British historians. Although he did get the Scots upset with him because he wrote a history book about the Scots, arguing that they totally made up stuff about how great the Scots were, like the kilts and stuff. He says they didn't have kilts. Those are a new thing just for tourists, etc. So that's kind of fun if you're into that. So, by the way, Trevor Roper, the author, wrote The Last Days of Hitler, which was famous and everybody read it. And then once more history came out, they discovered he was wrong about a lot of stuff. But he still stayed famous, so that's kind of interesting. So notice this is all about the same time. So, and what's it mean to say that it becomes mechanical? I've got a favorite scene here, and this is from Mind Walk movie. The whole thing. Here it is. Notice this movie is there, so if you want, you can go watch it. It's got all great actors. It's amazing to me that it didn't become famous.
Did you ever read any of the books that I sent you?
No, I'll tell you, not since you stopped thinking about coming back to help me with my speeches. Did you ever read any of the speeches I sent you?
Oh, I tried. The old attention span is not what it used to be.
That's true, mine either. I don't have any attention anymore for anything that's not specific. Poetry just confuses me.
Yeah, politics confuses everybody.
Including its practitioners. But I know what no saint stands alone means.
Oh yeah, what?
It's the essence of my profession. Because
Between every politician and his own point of view, there's always 3 fat cats, 2 tack lobbyists, half dozen microphones. No man is an island.
Entire of itself, every man is a piece of the continent, part of the name. Therefore, never send to know from whom the bell tolls. It tolls to thee. Can't you just feel the place watching you?
It makes you feel pretty small.
Yeah, I was supposed to.
From the kind of time you were talking about before, sunrise to sunset, Sabbath to Sabbath. This is mechanical time, isn't it?
You bet it is, you bet. I sometimes think that this clock, this machine, is what constitutes humanity's first real break from the world of nature. Wouldn't you say so? Hello?
The clock did much more than that. It became the model of the cosmos. And then they mistook the model for the real thing. People got the idea that nature was just a giant clock, not a living organism, but a machine.
That's exactly what I've been trying to tell this lunkhead. Exactly, word for word. Maybe you recognize him. Jack Edwards? And you're?
Sonia Hoffman. I think I've heard your name somewhere.
Yeah, maybe in a couple hundred news broadcasts. He was a candidate for the U.S. presidency in the primaries.
I vaguely remember. See, I'm not a voter.
Most Americans don't vote either.
I do know who you are.
Me? You know who I am? I doubt it.
You're Thomas Harriman, the poet.
Well, yes, I am, but wait a minute, let me get this straight. You recognize me, a poet whose latest work sold all 12,000 copies, but you do not recognize this gentleman who was a presidential candidate in America? My God, woman, what's happened to your values? What do you do?
I'm a scientist, and we do occasionally read poetry. As a matter of fact, I'm doing a lot of it these days. I'm on a sort of sabbatical. I'm an ex-physicist, an ex-American resident, an ex-voter.
Ex-wife?
This is very upsetting.
Why don't intelligent people like yourself bother to quote?
But forgive me, you politicians make it so hard. The ideas expressed by most of you, right and left, seem to me as antique and mechanical as that old clock.
What's that supposed to mean?
Well, if I was to explain that, I'd have to go all the way back to Descartes, if you remember him.
Yeah.
To be or not to be?
I think
That's
before I
totally
begin-
wrong.
Yeah, well, we both went to college.
Well, Descartes was the primary architect of the view that sees the world as a clock. A mechanistic view that still dominates most of the world today, and it seems to me, especially you politicians.
Mechanistic. Is that a real word?
Mechanistic, mechanical, mechanics. Yeah, it's a good word.
Mechanistic, as if nature functions like a clock. You take it apart, reduce it to a number of small, simple pieces, easy to understand, analyze them, put them all back together again, and then you understand the whole.
Isn't that what's known as scientific thinking, Miss Hoffman? Really? What you call the mechanistic view, isn't that what the scientific method's all about?
Is it?
Well, I don't think so, but I'd like to kind of hear from the physicist, Jack.
All right, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Well, you're right in a way, Mr.
Jack. Call me Jack.
Okay, Jack, you are right in a sense. But it wasn't always so, not before Descartes. When he introduced such thinking, it amounted to a revolutionary break with the church. He said, I don't need the Pope to tell me how the world functions, I can find that out for myself. Because to me, the world is just a machine. And then he became fascinated with clockworks and made a clock into a central metaphor. He said, I consider the human body as nothing but a machine. A healthy man is like a well-made clock. A sick man is like a ill-made clock.
Well, the metaphor seems a little clumsy now, but it worked, didn't it?
Yes, so successfully that scientists came to believe that all living things, plants, animals, us, are nothing but machines. And that's the fallacy. It carried over into everything, arts, politics.
I don't know, it seems to me that most people don't even remember who Descartes was.
I'm sorry, I guess I just don't follow you.
But he'd like to. If you could just break it down into 30-second media bites, that's more what he's used to.
Very funny. All right, what is it that I don't recognize?
What's so bad about Descartes?
But there's nothing bad about Descartes. In fact, I think Descartes is wonderful. He was a godsend to the 17th century. But times have changed since then. We need a new way of understanding life. That pendulum, for example, has long since been replaced by a tiny quartz crystal. And these magnificent hand-forged wheels turned into a microchip the size of my thumbnail. That's how far modern science
This
has
is an old movie.
realistic thinking behind. But you politicians, you seem to have that clockwork still ticking in your head.
So this, by the way, is a movie that was produced by Friedhof Capra's son. And Friedhof Capra was the one who wrote the book that it's based on. And that's, I think the title of it was The Turning Point. And it's about this turning point in physics, where today modern physicists are really using what we'll see later is Hegel's concept of an organic universe, organic. The metaphor becomes, instead of a clock, becomes the oak tree, thanks to Hegel. And so instead of things being mechanical and have parts, instead you have this growing concept. So it's much more difficult to know, when does an acorn become an oak tree, right? Is it already an oak tree, sapling? When does it become? So things are not. Plus, living things, organic things, tend to be merged with their environment. Whereas if you think of the gears in that clock, you're looking at really something that was forged, and apart from having to oil it every once in a while, it's not interacting with this environment. It's a terrific movie, by the way. I don't know why it's not more popular. It really shouldn't even be on the web for free, but there it is, as you can see. Okay. Great actors, too. But so Descartes gives us this mechanical point of view. By the way, he had a daughter named Francine, who died, I think she was about 5 or so. He was very upset, of course, losing his daughter. And to help make himself feel better, he made a mechanical doll that looked like her, and it scared the crap out of everybody that saw it. I'm thinking like Chucky or something, and so people literally got it away from him and destroyed it. So that's kind of amazing. But so he thought that the body was like a mechanical thing. Now, Thomas Hobbes did too, as we'll see. And so between the two of them, they're both really working on this Galilean approach to physical reality, right? You take Galileo's work and figure that it must work for the way the body works and try to figure it out, right? Thomas Hobbes is going to be a monist, or instead of a mind-body dualist, he believes that the body is all that there is of us, and the brain is the mind. So if you think today, that's kind of where we get our vocabulary interesting when we say, well, I have a brain, which we think of as the wetware inside my head, but the mind is something that's where consciousness is, and that could be mysterious, right? Well, for Hobbes, they're both the same thing. With Descartes, there's this mind-body dualism, but I suspect that one of the main reasons he kept doing that was not because he really believed it, but because he was aware of how important the consciousness was as a soul for the church if he wanted to avoid being burned at the stake. So I'm not sure that he really believed that the pineal gland had some kind of interaction with an abstract, insubstantial soul between the body. I think he came up with that pretty much as an excuse to keep himself out of trouble. But when you read what he describes the body doing, the mechanics of it explains everything. There's no need for this individual soul, and it usually has resulted in his getting critiqued by folks. So, for example, in one book it was referred to as Descartes' error, and that's by Antonio Damasio, who's a contemporary neuroscientist, who basically argues that Descartes' error is thinking that there's some sort of invisible soul inside of the brain. Am I out of time? No, we're still good, right? Okay. So Descartes' error. This is a good book, by the way. I'm of course defending Descartes, saying that he really didn't make the error. That was just trying to keep himself out of prison. But then we also have folks like Steven Pinker. And his book on this is The Blank Slate. And that's really much more against John Locke, who we'll be talking about when we get the chance. But he mentions Descartes too as an individual in trouble there. And the other really famous one is The Ghost in the Machine by Gilbert Ryle. Gilbert Ryle wrote a book. Actually, this one's a specific book titled The Ghost in the Machine, but the first use of the phrase, it says that here, was by Gilbert Ryle. And it's a critique of this Cartesian dualism, thinking that there's this invisible spiritual substance in the pineal gland that's interacting with the physical body. And the problem, of course, is that the body is all physical. All the levers and everything else are all physical. And the soul has none of those things. So you end up with this dilemma of how something that's completely non-physical can interact with something that is physical. Imagine sitting in a car with a stick shift, clutch, pedals, steering wheel, but if you have no arms or legs, right? Wow, how are you going to drive, right? That's kind of a dilemma. And there's also the concept of the homunculus, which is funny. The homunculus is essentially an image of this little, well, actually that's terrible. That's not the one I want. Let me put Descartes up here too and see if I get a better picture. Okay, so that's better. So you get the idea that sitting in my pineal gland is a little human in the driver's seat. It reminds me, for example, of these, if you've ever seen like Ready Player One or read the book, right? There's a couple imaginary robots that are being driven by the avatar of its complex, right? If you're familiar with that. So these avatars are sitting in these robots, driving them around and fighting and so on. So it's a lot like that. The only thing is, it becomes an infinite regression because you try to explain well, how does that homunculus know what's going on and makes free decisions? Well, that's because it has a homunculus in its pineal gland, and then again, still another one, etc. As you can see, it becomes an infinite regression. So there's a problem there, right? You know, how do you ever resolve this Cartesian problem? And by the way, we'll see other philosophers that are going to follow Descartes are going to be somewhat different. Spinoza, for example, will believe that there are two types, the spiritual and the physical. So he's a mind-body dualist also, but at the same time, he doesn't think that there's any interaction between them, which makes it interesting. Is that an earthquake? Or just noisy people? I've become very sensitive about that sort of thing. I don't know if you've had that problem too. I was on the Glen Highway driving under the Muldoon overpass when the big earthquake hit. It's kind of fun. But being dumb and dumber, I just kept going. I drove all the way to the campus and arrived and discovered that the admin building was a mess. So that was just me. So the homunculus. That's usually the quiz question I ask too, is what do you think is the biggest problem with Descartes' mind-body dualism? What do you think? Is that a good quiz question? You feel like messing with that one? What's his biggest problem with the mind-body dualism? In my way of thinking, and this is from our contemporary point of view, we look back and we might say, and actually agree with Spinoza, and that is that there are two separate conceptions. And that on the one hand we have the physical world, on the other hand we have what we might think of as the spiritual world, and in a sense we might explain it by saying we have two different sets of vocabularies. The phenomena isn't two separate sets of things, but we have different ways of talking about it, and they parallel one another. So I think that's how we handle it today. But Descartes didn't have that available to him. So next class we're going to look at Thomas Hobbes. I think I'm on track here, right?
I have a question.
Yes.
So the syllabus that I have doesn't have the dates on it like that. It's the dates from last semester, the one that's on Blackboard.
When you go to the web page, hit refresh. This little button here.
And it'll go to the current dates?
Yes. The thing is, when you're looking at a web page with your laptop or any browser, it normally, when you go to that page, will stay with the first time that you went there unless you ask it to update.
Oh, okay.
And my initial posting of this had the old dates before I fixed them. Yes, Joe?
Have the website pulled up there? It still shows last semester's dates.
No kidding. And yet I'm on it. Is this last semester? These are.
Yeah, ours doesn't say January. It's like August and September.
Check and see if you're at this same web page. It's 212191.htm. If you have an L there, that's last semester.
Oh, okay.
That's bad, huh? I should have done that. So change the letter, take the L off of it. Yes, what was your question?
On the syllabus, there's right above the dates and stuff, there should be a link that says current schedule that you can click, and then you can click a spring schedule, and then it'll show up these dates.
That's because you're clicking on a different link to it. But if you go from this link, that's going to take you to the correct one. So it might have even been this page that you needed to refresh. So I had to change that too. Sorry about that. I have thousands of pages on this one. This is a really old web page, the whole thing. I've been using it since 1995, so I think the last time I looked, there were like 10,000 pages on it. Sorry about that. It's because I'm old. I've been here all this time. And I'm ugly too. And then the last time I went to the doctor, I asked him for a second opinion. He said, then you're ugly too. That's a joke. Doctors are not allowed to say it. In fact, the last doctor I saw, I don't want to talk about what he was looking at.
Wasn't that last week?
Yes. Boy, talk about self-reflection. I was awake, so I got to watch. You know, first thing I didn't realize, such a hairy, well, let's not go there. You're supposed to have those like every 5 years or something. Once you're my age. I've decided though, if I get to have another one in 5 years, I'm not going to opt out of the anesthesia. That was not a fun experience. He said it would be just a little pressure. It hurt like hell. It's not. Sorry about that. I've learned I can use expressions like that with contemporary students, and they don't get mad at me. If that makes sense. Any other questions? Is this fun? You guys enjoying this?
Yeah.
It's really a significant time period. What I have planned, of course, for Thursday is for us. Did that work out, by the way, on your
It worked.
It worked. Phew, thank goodness.
Yeah, I took off. I just deleted the L out of the browser and it refreshed.
So what I'm looking at is because Descartes and Hobbes work together, and yet at the same time we're arguing with one another. Hobbes, as an empiricist, is opting totally for what becomes the British empiricist point of view. In fact, it's kind of odd. I don't know why they don't usually refer to Hobbes as a British empiricist. Officially, the first British empiricist is John Locke, because the so-called problem of empiricism begins with John Locke. Hobbes is unaware of it, and that's what leads to the solipsistic problem that David Hume talks about when you get to the end of that kind of trajectory of where empiricism's principles going to take them. And as I suggested today, we are much more in Hegel's philosophical insights and think of things as social, as social beings. For example, the sociality of reason is a book by Picard. Oh no, I didn't type it right. The idea that what we know through social dialogue with one another, etc. So, and in fact, a really fascinating flip on the cogito was, remember Descartes gives us cogito ergo sum, and what we also have is the sociological cogito. And this is Russell. In this book, Randy Collins, not Russell, you have a chapter at the end private language. Yes.
I may have missed one question for the day.
Oh, okay, so I guess I didn't emphasize it, but the quiz question for today is, what do you think is the problem with Descartes' mind-body dualism and the homunculus theory? Did I say that at all? Okay, but yeah, so what's the problem with the mind-body dualism? Do you think, I mean, when you think about it, the idea is that we have a soul that has no physical properties, and we have a body that is only physical, and yet somehow our soul, which is us, interacts with this physical body. You ever heard of that as a problem? See how that works? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. What do you think is the problem with it? There's no. So my metaphor of the guy with no arms and legs trying to drive a stick shift. How do you manage? How does the soul interact? So I guess we are done now for today. Is that fun?
Professor Jamison, I'm
Yes.
going to DC this week. I'm going to be on. I know. My sister has an internship, so I'm going to stay with her for 3 days. I just want to let you know.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I didn't get the full question. So I haven't done the first one yet. Was there a due date for these? Or did you?
You can still send them to me.
Okay.
Yeah, but what I'm thinking is, so Descartes is a mind-body dualist. He thinks that we have a body,
Mm-hmm.
that it proves that it exists, that I can trust whatever it says. What he thinks is that the mind is us, and that's our modern person, right? That lives somehow in there, but has no physical characteristics, because it's the soul, really. And so the question is, okay, so how does the soul get information from the body? I mean, everything the body is doing is like a mechanical robot, basically. So how does the soul know what's going on? If the body feels something hot, how does the soul know if the body has felt something hot? Because then the soul is supposed to say, okay, get away from that, because I don't want to burn myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the soul is interacting with this body, right? And the question is, well, but the soul has no physical properties. So it's not like you can go like this or anything, because the soul is like, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how does this work? And everybody agrees that Descartes' bonkers. This doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
You can't have this. Right? So some folks will go and say, okay, so it's clearly just that the body includes the mind and it's a physical thing. Well, the church isn't going to have any of that, because that does away with the soul, right? The other way is to go, everything is really a soul. There is actually no body, not in the physical sense that a lot of these folks were trying to argue in this period. Right? And that's the one that actually wins, because today we think of the body as consisting of all these minuscule particles which are going in and out of existence. It's made out of energy.
Mm-hmm.
Energy doesn't really have physical characteristics. At a point where it's combined with other energy, it gives the appearance of having physical characteristics. But when you zero in with like an electron microscope, notice there's nothing actually there.
It doesn't necessarily stop it from interacting with physical.
Oh, that's true.
Because you have dark matter, you can't really physically touch it, but dark matter does. It fluids gravity, so.
But it's all, we would today say it's all energy and an arrangement.
Sure. But it answered the question of how energy and physical interact, would probably be solving a lot of scientific problems.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thanks to Einstein, you get energy is mass times the speed of light squared, which means
Well, that's the equation.
E equals mc squared.
I mean, that's the equation for the nuclear bomb as well, but.
You're waiting to set up, right?
Oh, I've got time.
So do I need to shut any of this off? Or?
No, just go ahead and log out. You can log in and,
I'll leave it all on.
I'll wait for you to start.
Was I gonna sign you in? Or? Are you already in?